Yep.
This is Julian. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, very nice.
All right, good. And you're in Texas?
I was in LA for 23 years, but I moved to Austin about almost 11 years ago.
Well, how do you like Texas?
Well, I like it. It's pretty nice here. There's a lot of reasons why it's different than California. I mean, there's still some things about LA that I like, mostly that I know a lot of people and I have a lot of friends there.
And they're still there, is that right?
Well, some of them. With Greg's band, Greg also moved to Austin, so he and I both live here. But the keyboard player and the guitar player live in LA. The conga player lives in I think somewhere down by Orange County, maybe. And then the timbale player and the bass player live in San Francisco, and the crew guys live up there too.
Change your evil ways, baby, before I stop loving you.
How busy do you stay working with Greg?
We just did a few shows here recently, but he's been busy with this, he's done the Ringo thing on and off for 4 or 5 years now. But that's, when he does that, it's like a month here and a month there kind of thing. It's not like doing the Ringo thing has been prohibitive to us working, but he's also, for the last, I'd say a little over a year and a half maybe, he was doing that whole Santana reunion thing, and that kind of took up a bunch of time of his. And then also I did most of the CCR tour last year, and then I did a few of those shows this year too, but that's a whole other situation, which I can tell you about if you're interested.
Sure.
Well, CCR is, Creedence Clearwater. They call it Creedence Clearwater Revisited now, is what they call it. But it's basically the original drummer and bass player from Creedence Clearwater Revival, which is Doug Clifford and Stu Cook, and it's their band, and they've had it now since, 95 or 96. I think they started it somewhere back then. Mm-hmm. It might be longer than that. It might be like 93 or something. Anyway. Doug, the drummer, about 3 years ago, he had an issue where he threw his back out or something. And the guitar player who plays with him now was the guitar player in Greg's band. He's a really good friend of mine. And prior to that, with Greg's band, we did a few shows with CCR, so I met those guys and stuff. And anyway, when he threw his back out, he called me and like 2 days before they were leaving and said, "Hey man, I can't do these shows this weekend. Can you fill in?" So I said, yeah, it turned out I was available that weekend. And then, but I had to learn the whole show really quickly. And then I basically showed up at sound check, went over a couple of endings and then did the show that night and did 3 shows in a row. And that was 2013. And then I didn't do anything for the rest of that year, or for a little over a year with them. He got better, and then he was working with. Then in October of 2014, I got another call from him, basically saying the same thing, but it turned out that he wasn't really sure what was wrong at that time. But I wound up doing the rest of the year with them in 2014, and then most of the year in 2015, because it turned out he was pretty much out of commission most of 2015. And so I did that whole tour pretty much. He did do a couple of shows, like he played in Reno, which is where he lives. So that's the essentially the CCR story in a nutshell.
When you showed up for the first gig and you'd only had limited time to practice and all that, I mean, you've got a very dynamic background, obviously, with all the things you've done over the years. How are your nerves? I mean, do you ever get yourself in a situation where you kind of got butterflies in your stomach?
Not really. I tend not to really, I don't ever feel nervous, but there's always things where not quite sure what's going to happen. But, kind of in my experience, or at least the way I think of it, and maybe other people would think of it differently, I just kind of look at it like, well, look, it's music. It's not like if I make a mistake or somebody makes a mistake, or even if there's a little train wreck, it's not the end of the world,
Right.
It's just music, So I try not to take it, too extreme, or, of course you want to do a great job. You want to play great. You don't want to miss any cues or any endings or any, any important stuff in the show. You want to make it seem as seamless as possible, especially when you're just coming in there. You haven't done it before. But, I did a lot of homework. I listened to it. I charted all the songs out, and then I scanned all the charts into PDF files, and then I loaded them up onto an app on my iPad called Fourscore. And basically it's this kind of app where you can put music in there, sheet music. In this case, this was my handwritten stuff. Mm-hmm. It wasn't printed out sheet music, but it was my handwritten notes. And the thing that's cool about Fourscore is that, well, there's lots of cool things, and I'm sure there are other apps out there that do the same stuff, but you can put the files in order of the set. And so you can just hit the side of the screen and it goes to the next song, and you could even use it. I didn't do this with Creedence, but you can do it to where it generates a click track and all kinds of other things. But for my purposes, it was nice that I could just have these notes to refer to, because, there was 20 songs or something, or I forget how many songs, 20 or 22 songs or something, where, there's a lot of stuff to remember. And a lot of those songs are kind of similar. The Creedence sound is, pretty identifiable. So it's easy to kind of get confused, which thing happens in which song.
Yeah.
So it was nice to be able to have those notes to refer to, and then it made things go more quickly. And then, when I first got there, I got to the hotel, I got with the guitar player, my friend, and kind of went through all the recordings that they had sent me and just kind of asked him what things were really important, which things I didn't need to worry about, that sort of thing. Went over the set with the band, and with Stu, the bass player, we went over things that, that they wanted to deal with or wanted to make sure I was okay with or comfortable with. And then we just played, and, it was fine. I don't think, from what I understand, nobody's ever complained. So,
yeah.
So I guess that's good,
Sure. Now, when you get to these gigs, and I'm sure there's going to be different situations and all that, but are you playing, you taking your drums, or are you playing his drums, or is it backline gear, or what are you doing gear-wise?
Well, almost all of these kinds of shows are backline gear things, because unless you're on a big tour, where the tour's got, trucks and the carrying sound and lights and all that stuff, it's not really cost effective to ship your stuff. Mm-hmm. So, we give the promoter a rider, which has all the specs of everybody's gear on there, and sound and lighting specs and all that kind of stuff. And that's figured into the contract. And, depending on the venue, some of the venues have gear, whether it's sound and lights, or some of them even have backline. It's really kind of depends on the venue and where where you're going, what they have and stuff. I always have, obviously, Sonor drums on the rider, but I don't always get them because Sonor is not as common, unfortunately, as some of the other drum companies. And so if you go to some towns, they just don't have them.
Yeah. Well, I've seen pictures where you've taken a picture from behind the kit, and it was not a Sonor kit. And it just made me wonder, do you ever get somewhere and see what they've got for you to play and just kind of cringe?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But, you just have to deal with it.
Right.
As they say, the show must go on.
Yes, sir.
You just get through it. And, Sometimes it makes it harder to play. Sometimes you get maybe a bass drum pedal that just doesn't feel good, and you have a difficult time executing things that you maybe wouldn't have as difficult a time with otherwise, or even a difficult time. And then there's other things like, well, just for example, I mean, DW makes good drums, but they make this one snare drum stand that just drives me bananas. Where like the legs of the stand are in one spot, and then they've got this long connecting arm that makes the basket like, half a foot over in one direction. You can just never get the legs and the drum in the right spot. So I've taken to having to specifically put on the rider that I don't want that stand. I'd rather have some cheapo straight up and down snare drum stand that I can just put, right where I want it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I've sometimes had difficulty with is if they send a kit that doesn't have the mount that's on the bass drum for the rack toms, then what that means is they'll send floor stands for the rack toms, which just makes everything harder. Because now I've got 2 extra floor stands and sometimes 3, depending on, sometimes 3 or 4, because sometimes the floor toms they send don't have legs either, which I always specify that I want them with legs. Because now, then when you have all these stands, then you can't get, cymbals in the right spot. It's fine, I guess, if it's your drum kit that you use all the time and you get it set up and you have, your system. But when you're there at sound check and you're trying to get it set up, and you just don't want to spend all that time and messing around with it. And we have our crew guys will go in and set the drums up, set all the gear up for us. But when it's an unfamiliar drum kit, they don't, they can't really get it exactly how you want it anyway, because it's different gear, and it's just an imprecise thing. So I don't know. I struggle with it sometimes. All in all, I got to say, I've done hundreds and hundreds of these kinds of gigs where I get backline, and it's all over the world in obscure places too. Like, I mean, I've played in like Dubai and Bermuda and the Philippines and Malaysia and all these different places where you just get a drum kit sent to you, and I've always been able to make it work. So that's good.
Yeah. Well, what are you playing with Sonor now? What's the rig you have that you use when you can from Sonor?
I have designer series drums, which I've had for a long time, and the configuration may vary depending on the gig. But the basic setup is a 22-inch kick, 10 and 12-inch racks, and 16 and 18 floors. Sometimes I'll put like a 14-inch mounted or 14 or 16-inch mounted rack tom to my left, but not always. I don't tend to use a lot of cymbals. I usually either use a ride, 20-inch ride, 17, 16-inch crashes, sometimes a splash cymbal, and every once in a while I'll add, maybe an 18-inch or a China or something like that, if I, depending on what I'm doing. But typically, most of the stuff I've been doing, especially where I'm doing the backline, I just stick with the ride and 2 crashes, keep it simple.
Right. Your endorsement deal with Sonor, do you talk to them very often, or are you a very low maintenance kind of guy, or how does that work?
I'm the most low maintenance guy probably on their roster.
Yeah.
I hardly ever talk to them.
Really?
I know that in the past, some of the artist rep guys, or whatever they call themselves, have complained because some guys will call them like every day or every week. Hey, I need this, I need that. I never do that. Maybe I should do more of it. I don't know. Because I'm not, maybe I should be more of a squeaky wheel. I don't know, but I've just never been that way. If I need something, I'll call up or email or whatever, but I hardly ever need anything. So, and the stuff with Sonor drums, they're great drums. And like I said, I've had these designer, I've had my one green designer kit I've had for 22 years. I was one of the first guys to get the designer kit. And in fact, before it was even out, I was up in San Francisco, and Oliver Link was still with the company. And I went and had lunch with him, and he showed me all the drawings and stuff when they were getting ready to put that out. And then when I was in David Lee Roth's band, I'm pretty sure at the time, 94. Yeah, that would have been David Lee Roth. And so I was one of the first people to get a designer kit, and I used it on that tour with Dave, and then I used it again, with Foreigner and some of the other things. In fact, it's still, the green ones still have the Foreigner bass drum logo on the front.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And how long ago is it you played with Foreigner?
I played with them from 95 to 98, so 3.5 years or something like that.
So besides Sonor, what companies do you endorse?
I've been a Zildjian endorser since, 86 or something like that. And I for drumsticks, I was with a company called Rimshot for also since probably 85 or 86. And I just found out about a year ago that they're out of business. So I don't have a drumstick endorsement at the moment. I mean, I guess I technically still have it with them because they never actually called me to say that they were out of business. I found out kind of by accident because I invited one of them to a show.
Well, I guess you ordered enough sticks in advance. You didn't need any for a while. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I still have a bunch there, but I'll probably need some at some point.
Yeah.
I guess I should probably talk to another company or something. But anyway, and then, I've always had a deal with Remo for drum heads, but it's always been a little bit informal. I'm not one of these guys that calls up all the time and, hey, what about me? What about me?
Yeah.
Put me in your ads and all that stuff. You don't really see me in a lot of ads. I mean, I've been in a couple of Sonor posters or whatever, but I don't know. I've just never been one of these, one of the guys that tries to get my face out there all the time, which maybe I should have been. I don't know. And then for a while there, I had an EV Electro Voice endorsement for microphones, but the guy that was there, he left a while ago, so I don't think that really, I don't even know anybody over there anymore. So.
Well, how often do you actually take your rig out on the road with you these days?
Almost never. It's because of what I said earlier, the cost of it.
Right.
If I was going to go out and it was going to be on an extended tour, and the tour had really it comes down to the tour being big enough, the tour being able to support the expense of transporting all this stuff. And, that was the case when I was doing, the Cher and the Storm and the Foreigner and Roth and all that stuff that we did take all of our own gear. But, with Greg or with CCR or whatever, where the budgets for the shows are not big enough to support, you'd spend all the money from what you got paid just on shipping your gear, and paying for flights and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why it's just more cost effective to use backline. And, that's what a lot of people do. With the exception of the guys I know like Journey and, the bands that are on big tours, almost all of them are using backline because, it's just the way it is, the economics of the situation. And, I do try to always, like I said, I always try to get Sonor and that stuff whenever I can. But unfortunately, and this is a discussion I've had with them, too. It's not like it's a mystery. Mm-hmm. And there are some guys, to be honest with you, there's some guys who get more attention and more accommodation. Like Steve Smith, who's a great guy and an amazing drummer and well-deserved of everything that he's gotten and achieved and all that. But, he's got, I'm pretty sure that, I don't know if it's Sonor that keeps them for him, but I know he's got, drums on the East Coast, drums on the West Coast. I think he has drums in Europe, so he is able to be accommodated a little bit more easily. And also, I think, he's just a higher profile guy. So a lot of the things that he does are maybe there's more of a budget. I don't know, but I assume there must be. I know he got a whole new drum set for the Journey tour, which, they put together for him. And they took that on the road because that is a big tour that they take their gear on,
Right. Well, I'm hoping to be talking to him soon.
Oh, well, yes, Steve's a good guy, and he's a drum. He's like a drum. What do you call that? Savant or whatever.
Yeah. Well, everybody I've talked to so far in the Sonor world, and maybe it's maybe it's the industry altogether. I don't know, but probably not. But everybody I've talked to just seems to be such a high caliber of person. The first time you and I did an interview, it was a lot different. It wasn't on the phone. It was through email and all that. But, I remember you sending me an unholy number of sound files. And and it was just, it was surprising because I wasn't expecting it. And I had them up on my website. But then when the interviews went over to the Sonor Museum, they didn't get moved. They were lost, to be honest with you.
Oh, okay.
Everybody I've dealt with so far has had just such a down-to-earth, sincere attitude. And I've enjoyed that very much. And
good.
And I appreciate that a whole lot, by the way.
Oh, well, yeah, I think that's good to hear. I'm glad you're not encountering a lot of attitude or whatever from people. That's good. Hopefully, I tend to try to believe anyway that people who are trying to do things at a high level have hopefully some degree of humility. You want to have obviously confidence and belief in your ability, but humility is also good because without that, you don't think that you can ever be better.
Right.
So if you want to be a better musician, then it helps to have some humility or better anything, better baseball player, whatever,
Sure. Something you touched on earlier, you said when you are out on the road, on your riders, you do specify Sonor. Now, as of the last couple of years, when you do specify Sonor and get it, what are you getting? What models? And have you seen anything that just really appealed to you? What are you
to be honest with you, most of the time it's not the higher end Sonor stuff. I've never even played an SQ2 drum set.
Really?
And I've been a Sonor endorser. I've been a Sonor endorser since 1990. I've never played one of those.
Wow.
Except I've kind of hit on them a little bit at the NAMM show, but I don't even know the model names that they wind up delivering to these shows. They sound good to me. That's all I care about.
So you don't you don't order the latest catalog and drool over it while you're sitting there memorizing the pages, huh?
No, I do not.
Well, have you seen the new vintage Sonor series?
I've seen them, but again at the NAMM show, but I've never used them.
I got a friend that's got a set, and man, they're really classy looking, and they sound good too. I tell you what, that's one thing about Sonor. You can pretty much count on a sound good sound coming out of their drums, even when they're trying something new, if you can call vintage new. But you know what I'm saying.
Well, I've actually found that to be the case on their, their quote-unquote lower model lines, the ones that would be considered entry or mid-level model lines. I think those tend to sound really good, too. Sonor, to me, one of the things that I like about their drums and their approach is it's very, at least in my experience, it's always been very sort of precision-oriented, Right. I went to their factory when I was on tour over there in Germany one time, and it was like everything was perfect, It's kind of like, I think of it as the sort of the Mercedes of drums, kind of, just really a lot of attention to detail, a lot of attention to quality control, all that stuff. And, they've also had, I think, relative consistency. Karl-Heinz Menzel has been there for a long time. He's been there longer than I've been an endorser. And like I said, I've been an endorser now for almost 27 years. And Andy has been there for a long time, Andy Strack. Thomas Barth, I don't know how many years he's been there now, but it's been a little while. I mean, they've had a few other guys. They had John Dyke and a couple of other guys. But they tend to, I think, have consistency in their product, in the stuff that they make. It's all really good. I have some of the Sonor percussion stuff in my studio, the congas and timbales. That stuff is great, too. And there was one time, I remember when we were, I think it was in Canada, we did a show, and, we have in Greg's band, there's a timbale player and a conga player. At the time, the conga player was Mike Carabello, who's the original Santana conga player. And we wound up with all Sonor. I had Sonor drums, and there was Sonor congas and Sonor timbales, and those guys loved it. They thought it sounded great, and it does. And at one point, I was trying to get them hooked up to be Sonor percussion endorsers through Jerry Goldenson when he was with the HSS. But then, I don't know what happened. I think Jerry wound up leaving or something. It just never came together, but... But anyway, they make, everything they make is really good. I mean, I have a couple of Sonor cowbells and Sonor shakers and stuff in my studio that sound really great. They're really well made, and I've yet to come across anything that they make that isn't well made.
Yeah, you mentioned even on the lower end on the drum sets, and I used to have a Sonor dealership, and I sold a good bit of the lower end stuff. And I honestly, it wasn't a sales pitch, but I would tell people I would put anything Sonor makes against anything else in its price point or better. And I agree with you. They got an attention to detail, and I guess I could sit here and ramble on all day, but you probably got better things to do, don't you?
Well, there's always stuff to do.
Yep.
I work a lot in my studio. I keep one of my Sonor kits set up in my studio all the time, so I do a lot of tracks in there,
Now, is that a specific kit you keep set up?
I keep part of the green designer series kit that I have set up in there.
Okay.
So it's not the whole thing, because the whole thing is huge. It's got 2 bass drums and all kinds of other stuff. I just keep a basic version of that set up in there. 2 racks, 1 floor. But it's great for recording, and they sound great. And I mean, I hardly even ever have to change drum heads on those. They just always sound good.
Yeah. Well, what does the future hold for you, Ron?
Well, I mean, I do a lot of those sessions. So all the sessions I'm on, they're always Sonor drums. It's just the live stuff where I, when we have to deal with the backline where I don't get them sometimes. I have a record that I just did with a singer named Marcy Requist, which is Requist, which is it's not a big drumming record or anything. It's a collection of songs that are meant to be like kind of comforting for people that are going through some stuff in their life. And I produced it, and Matt Bissonette from Elton John's band is playing bass on it. That's Greg's brother. And a really good friend of mine, Wally Minko, is playing keyboards. And it's a really, really good record.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Anyway, that just came out. It's available on her website, which is marcyrequest.com, and it's on iTunes and all those places too. And I did a record for a jazz guy that, you know, I do a lot of stuff where people will just send me their songs and ask me to play on it, and then in some cases, I wind up doing more. In his case, he asked me to get some other musicians. So again, I got Matt and Wally to play on that. So anyway, we did that, and I'm working on a record right now with Dave Isley and Craig Goldie. Craig was the guitar player with Dio for a long time. So I really run the gamut, you know. On Marcy's record, it's this really mellow, low-key stuff, very soothing kind of music. You know, I'm only playing on like half the record. Some of it is just like piano and vocal, that kind of thing. And then there's the jazz thing, which is, you know, I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a jazz player, but, you know, I can do some of that stuff. And so that's a whole other direction. And then this thing with Dave and Craig is just, you know, just balls out rock stuff, you know. So I keep busy with these different kinds of projects, and some of it I wound up even, you know, helping to produce or mix or whatever. On Marcy's record, I produced it and mixed it. So, you know, I keep myself busy with these different things and these different gigs. The gigs seem to continue on and on. So, you know, knock on wood, I'm happy about those. Sometimes it's busier and sometimes it's not so busy, but, you know, it's just the way the music business is. You know, it's always been that way.
Yeah.
You got more stuff than you know what to do with, and sometimes you can't get arrested. You know?
Ron, do you have any closing thoughts?
You asked if I was one of those high maintenance guys. I'll tell you one thing that I've had discussions with some of the artist rep guys about in the past is sometimes you see, and I know there are many reasons why this happens, but sometimes you'll see guys, you know, that go from one company to the next all the time. Mm-hmm. And like some guys have been with, you know, 10 different drum companies. And I always wondered about that because people tend to misuse the word. They call themselves an endorsee. And I don't think that's really the right word. I think you're an endorser. And the reason I say that is because by playing a particular brand of instrument, you're saying that you endorse that product. That's why you're playing it, you know, because you really like that product. I mean, I guess you could say it the other way around, that the company is endorsing you as a player. But really, the reason why they have endorsers is because they want other people to look at, you know, you as a professional musician playing their product and think, okay, well, if that guy plays it, then it must be pretty good. That's ultimately the reason why any company has any endorsers. It's a way for the buying public to feel better about the product, right?
Right.
So when somebody switches companies all the time, it just kind of, I don't know, makes me wonder.
Well, it seems
do they
insincere.
do they really endorse the product, or are they just, I mean, as I said, I know sometimes there are reasons why things happen. Like I said, my drumstick company just went out of business. Nothing I can do about that.
Right.
You know, sometimes a really good company will come along, and for some guys, they'll make them a really amazing offer that they just can't refuse. Or maybe somebody has some kind of problem or whatever with some company and they have to switch. So I know that those things happen, but tried to do it anyway is to not be wishy-washy. I've only ever been with Sonor. My point being, though, that the companies that I have endorsed and been with, I've always been with. I've never switched.
Yeah.
I've been with Zildjian since, like I said, 85 or 86, and Sonor since 1990. I mean, there's been opportunities to switch, but I just never have.
You kind of reiterated something Buzz said in the 2 phone interviews I've done with him. He said the product doesn't endorse the artist endorses the product, you know, from his point of view. So, I mean, in a different way, you've restated his point, and, I think it's an interesting take on that. And I don't think a lot of people really see it that way. They don't really think about it that way,
I think that's the only way to see it. I don't know how you can see it. I know people do see it different ways, but I don't know how they can.
Right. Well, Buzz's point was that, there's only a limited number of advertisements you're going to run as a factory or, as a distributor or whatever. And, you can only offer that level of support to so many folks. I mean, I guess. Yeah,
and different companies have different budgets too, and I think Sonor's budgets or the distributor budgets may not be as high as like some bigger companies. And also their presence, just, part of Sonor's issue, I think, in America has always been that they're a little bit more expensive and their distribution network is not as vast as like, some of the other companies, Pearl or whatever.
Right.
So, which is also the reason why I have trouble getting them on backline, because they're just not as common. Only certain people are going to buy the upper end stuff. A lot of people can't afford it.
Right.
You know who can afford it though? The successful professionals like doctors and lawyers who like playing an instrument for fun. They can afford the high level stuff. I mean, some of those guys will spend $100,000 on a vintage guitar,
Yeah.
So I bet you, and I'm not a marketing guy either, but I bet you, companies like Sonor or whatever could figure out a way to market to those guys. It might sell more to them than they would to the high school kids or college kids or whatever.
I've always assumed that Sonor probably moves a lot more product than the average Joe like me realizes. I mean, they're not going bankrupt or anything that I know of.
Well, and the other thing to remember too about Sonor is that they're a German company. You see them a lot more in Europe than you do here. And I'm sure that that's because their presence is more well known there. They're more of a known quantity, known company, and it's easier to distribute there. They don't have to ship them across the ocean.
Right.
And, it's a big world. I'm sure they sell stuff all over the world. And so, not that they sell nothing in America. They sell, quite a bit of it. They're just not as big.
Right.
As the bigger companies.
They're very popular in Japan, and I did not know that till
Oh,
later.
yeah. Yeah, I got Sonor drums over in Japan. When I was on tour with Sambora over there, we got the Sonor backline.
Really? I'd have never guessed it.
Yeah, no, they had it. It was actually not a problem. And I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive that I got, because when I toured with Sambora, we only ever played out of the country. We played Japan, Australia, and Europe. And I'm pretty sure I got Sonor every time on the back line. I'm almost positive I did.
Well, Ron, I sure appreciate your time.
Nice talking to you.
Well, it's nice talking to you too.
All right, take care. Bye.